keys here are specifically addressing the negative aspect logically and stuff. So this is the last on that page. That's that last section. Why it is important. Now, if you've already put that in the first series of lines, the why it is important is actually these two bullets here. A means to enable your listener to resist future attacks and helps your credibility. So this is why it's important. This is the definition of it. This is why it's important here, these last two bullets here. And then the last part, the keys are the specifically addressing logically, clearly, with relevance, breaking down, and a soft approach as opposed to a hard approach. Let me give you a sense of how something like a refutational-different defense could work in the real world. Let us say you are applying for a job, and it's with Donald Trump. And in the job description, it says 2 years of experience preferred. Now, you don't have those 2 years experience. But in everything else, in terms of the job description, you're dead on. You have everything else. So what you decide to do is you decide to apply for the job anyway. About 2 weeks later, you get an email, a letter, a phone call, whatever, from Donald Trump's corporation. They want you to come up to New York City and have an interview. Now, when you get to the interview and you walk in the waiting room, you see 5 or 6 other people in Donald Trump's offices, all dressed very nicely like you, all holding their portfolios. So clearly, they're also there to apply or do interview for the job. Now, one of the things that you can assume about those other applicants is that maybe they have experience that you don't. So how do you handle that in the interview? And there's no absolute right or wrong way of doing it. And it could be a risk to do this, but it is worth thinking about. You're being interviewed not by Donald Trump, but by people who work for him. Once you receive their approval, they will send their recommendations to Donald Trump, and then he will interview the people they have recommended. It's toward the end of the interview. They have not asked you anything at all about your experience or your lack of experience. And so, what you could do at this point is when it gets to the point where they say, do you have any questions or anything else you'd like to say? You could always try this. You could say, I know you've read my resume and I know you've read my application. I know that you would prefer somebody with 2 years experience, and I clearly do not have 2 years experience in this field. However, there are times when maybe having experience is not always the most positive thing. Because if you hire me from day one, I am going to be able to do it and motivated to do it the way that Mr. Trump wants to do it. You don't have to retrain me. You don't have to somehow get me to think differently than I did at another company. Now, obviously, I have skills in other areas, but if I haven't done this particular job before, I better be the type of person who can learn quickly, can handle pressure, can hit the ground running. And I'm that type of person. And if you look at my resume, you talk to my previous employers, you will find out that when I've been given new situations where I had to learn fast, I've always been successful. So, I'm not here to say that having experience, previous experience, is necessarily a bad thing, but there can be positives to getting somebody with a totally fresh point of view, provided that they have the ability to learn fast. You've said what you had to say. They shake your hand and you leave. And you're now out of the equation. Those people who are interviewing you are now flipping through all the forms or information or all the other things that are necessary as a part of sending their recommendations to Donald Trump. And they decide to send yours. Now, Donald Trump is reading these applications, and he sees yours, and he turns to the people who recommended you and say, why did you recommend this person? They don't have any experience. You know, I would really prefer somebody who has experience. Now remember, Donald Trump is now attacking you. Kind of the way that the tetanus is attacking your foot and your body when you step on that rusty nail. Now, if you had the tetanus shot, you now have something in your body. You've been inoculated to fight that tetanus. Because you have done a good job of educating and enlightening those people who interviewed you in terms of the fact that having experience isn't always a positive thing. There can be negatives. And you've educated them in the fact that you have great skills in terms of learning quickly. They are now able to fight Donald Trump's attack on you. And at that point they can say, that's true, Mr. Trump, this person doesn't have experience in this area. But during their interview, and they volunteered this, they pointed out something very interesting. They said, is it always a good idea to have experience? Isn't it good to have somebody who has just a plain, open approach to the way we do things? And that may be a good thing. And Mr. Trump, do you remember last year when we hired Smithers from Microsoft? Trump goes, yeah, Smithers. We hired him, and he kept saying, Bill Gates does it this way. Bill Gates does it that way. God, he was such a pain. I wish it was like The Apprentice, where I could just fire them after a week. And it took me, 6 months and 2 lawyers and $500,000 to get rid of that person. All because he always wanted to do Bill Gates' way. That's correct, Mr. Trump. One of the people replies to them. If you hire this person, you don't have to reteach them. Now, we've talked to this person's former employers. They've indicated that this person does learn quickly, can handle the pressure, follows directions well, can be up and running very quickly. And maybe that's something that we should consider. You're not in the room anymore. Donald Trump has attacked you, but you're not there. But because you've educated those people who interviewed you, because you dealt with the possible negatives and turned them into positives, they are now, those people who interviewed initially, are making the arguments for you. Had you not addressed those negatives, and then Donald Trump, and they had brought your name forward, and Donald Trump had then questioned them in terms of why hire somebody who doesn't have any experience, they may not have a response because you haven't taught them that. And that's what a refutational different defense is you address the possible negatives. You show that on balance, that your positives are greater than the negatives. And that by telling people these, if somebody then attacks your point of view after you're not there anymore, then they are prepared for it. They've learned it. And that's why it's called inoculation theory. So that's why what I would like you to do in your speech at some point is to address in some way the opposition and just say, hey, here, my side isn't perfect. Here's what some of my opponents have to say. They may sound valid on the surface, but on balance, my side is much better. And so that's what inoculation theory is and refutational defense.